Om Sahanā-Vavatu, Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavaditamastu, Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. On below Satguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki Jai, and for all the saints and sages of all the traditions. Jai. Okay. The questions. Best to start there. What is this bondage? When did it begin? What is its nature? How to free oneself from it? What is the non-Atman, the non-I? What is the I? And how to discern, how to tell the difference. And this is our last of the sessions, right here, on Viveka Chudamani. So we discussed this morning, and we've been discussing it, but we'll take Shankaracharya's guidance on how to be free of bondage. That's the discussion. And he'll come back here. But the point has been made already that all of this, the three bodies and the five sheaths, are the non-I, non-Atman, that they are instruments of the Atman, and that they serve the Atman. That was the discussion yesterday. And we discussed the Atman yesterday, the I, and the nature of the I. And so we come back and have some discussion about the instruments, that which we're identified with, and what to do with them in order to be free of bondage, in order to realize the nature of I, the real I, and be free of bondage. So we'll pick up some of what he says directly and then discuss. First, he comes back to the mind and discussion on the mind. He says, with a controlled mind and an intellect which is made pure and tranquil, you must realize the Atman directly within yourself. Know the Atman as the real I. Thus you cross the shoreless ocean of worldliness, whose waves are birth and death. Live always in the knowledge of identity with Brahman and be blessed. And he goes on, what is this bondage and what is the cause of the bondage? He says, man is in bondage because he mistakes what is not him, not I, for the real I, for the real self. This is caused by ignorance. I know the first time I heard this, of course, ego perks up as soon as it hears, I am stupid. And it starts to defend itself. And we all know what that's like, and we don't even want to admit it. But it starts to defend itself immediately. It starts to say something like, you don't understand me. Yes? And then if we don't catch it, those words come out of our mouth, and now we're in the world where it's important that you understand me instead of that I understand myself. Yes? And that's a terrible world, isn't it? It's an awful world. And everyone's experiencing this. This is what the person is, starting with the causal body, which is that ignorance. So ego hears the word ignorance and perks up to try to defend itself, because that's what ego does. It defends an illusory self, a false self, and stands as the individual where there is no individual. And so it says, I'm not stupid. and when we miss it, we lose ourselves to that once again. We lose the capital S self, meaning it's veiled. And so the first step he's talking about is controlling the mind and purifying the intellect, which means, Swami Shivananda's words, learn to unmind the mind. Learn not to believe it. This is key, because the believing it, the accepting it, is bondage. And the learning to work with the mind in a way that it becomes trained, it adopts beneficial practices, and learning to utilize this intellect in a way that's pure, free from the conditioned notions, free from the reactive tendencies. Intellect is power of rationation, power of inquiry, power of discovery. It's the power underlying action. Reaction is the conditioned aspect, what we call subconscious mind, manomaya, kosha. And so we want an intellect that does not lose itself to that reaction, that is effectively non-reactive. And so controlling the mind and purifying the intellect, he says, this is it. And what's the goal? To know the real I. That's the goal. To know the real Atman. And not just to know it, we'll discuss more, but also to surrender to it. We can say that in a common parlance. We'll discuss more. And again, he reminds what is the bondage. Because we mistake, and this is the entirety of humanity until we realize. And it's a one by one, the realization is a one by one affair. Nobody else can do it for us. This has been discussed as well. We have to do it ourselves. The instruments that we have in our hand, as it were, are the proper instruments for us to realize. But we have to do the quote-unquote work. And this is what's being described. So, deluded by this ignorance, a man mistakes one thing for another. Lack of discernment will cause a man to think that a snake is a piece of rope. When he grasps it in this belief, he runs a great risk. And this applies to all of the sense objects, all of that which we perceive as real. When we grasp them as reality, when we succumb to otherness, then we're lost. And the more we succumb to otherness, the more lost we become. And the less we succumb to it, the more we assert our innate divinity, the more we live according to, what does that mean? Live in the light, or we'll discuss intellect a little more in a moment, but the more we choose through the rationating faculty, through the intellect, to live according to the light instead of the ego sense. And the ego sense will still assert. It'll still assert. Within, in this mind, when we're very much on the path, we'll still hear this voice in the head saying, you don't understand me. But we learn through the purification of the intellect and the assertion which is happening in the intellect itself, in the rationating faculty, I'm not following you anymore. Because, thank God, the Atman, as Guru, also speaks to us in this still silent voice inside, and it is possible to connect with it. It is possible for the rationating faculty to find it, to recognize it, to clear away the dross of the non-I and not pay attention to it and not listen to it any longer, not take the guidance for life from it any longer, and tune more and more into that still silent voice, into the God-centered nature, as Peace Pilgrim would say. And so, and this, the study of what we're doing right now is a part of the process. The fact that any of us chose on a Saturday morning or whenever, with joining us online, whenever, to imbibe in these teachings indicates that we are certainly moving in this direction towards taking the light as the reality and clearing away the dross. And Shankaracharya says, this is it. This is the way. Control the mind, purify the intellect, and point yourself towards the real Atman. Recognize its nature and live according to it. Stop identifying with the non-I. He starts here. And this is done in the mind. It says, man's... let me move on. The body. We'll talk about the body for a moment. This body is the physical covering. Food made its birth possible. On food it lives. Without food it must die. It consists of cuticle, skin, flesh, blood, bone, and water. It cannot be the Atman, the ever pure, the self-existent. It did not exist before birth. It will not exist after death. It exists for a short while only in the interim between them. Its very nature is transient and subject to change. It is a compound, not an element. It's a compound of other elements. It is not an element in itself. It has no standing here on its own. It has no standing here. I remember a conversation a couple of years back with one of our lovely Sangha about coffee, of all things, enjoying coffee. And what we were discussing is that the coffee, which is the bean, really the essence of it, you grind it up, you mix it with water, you drink it, but the coffee itself, and then you say this drink is coffee, but the coffee itself is an essence which is providing the taste and the smell and all of this. It's in suspension. What you're drinking is a compound of multiple, but the individual elements are actually eternal, as much as the world is eternal. That which is providing the smell, the taste, etc. of what you call coffee is eternal. It's always existed. As long as a world has existed, it has existed. So there is an essence there. But then the drinking of it, and then we say the coffee is gone. No, the coffee is not gone, because the coffee goes through the entire cycle. The drink is gone because that was temporal, that only lasted for a moment. But the coffee itself is eternal. Do you catch that? Does it make any sense? So in the same way, the Atman is flowing through this body. All of the life force, all of the intelligence, everything is borrowed by the body. The body doesn't have any of it itself. But at this point in time, it is a compound. It is made up of the 5 elements and animated by the life force and given intelligence by that intelligence, Satchidananda. It doesn't have anything of its own. It's temporal. It's just a coming together of this life force in conjunction with the elements, according to a script, according to a program, according to a law that defines, or a spec sheet. I used to call them data sheets. The DNA, right? The DNA, yeah. But then it comes and it goes. So of course you're not this. Of course you're not this compound. The compound is constantly changing, but the essence, which is the Atman, is eternal, always real. So the body consists of arms, legs, and other limbs. It's not the Atman. For when those limbs have been cut off, a man may continue to live and function through the remaining organs. The body is controlled by another. It cannot be the Atman. which is the controller. So it's controlled by the Atman. So therefore it cannot be. Again, we had the discussion yesterday. Whatever we're experiencing cannot be who we are. Whatever we experience. So, and we know Shankaracharya is reminding us of this because there's a practice here, and the practice is to disidentify with it, to end the identification with it. Purification. And he speaks of the practice here, purification. How to purify this intellect. He says the mind, together with the organs of perception, forms the mental covering, quote unquote. It causes the sense of I and mine. The mind causes the sense of I and mine. And again, you know it, you have experience that proves it, because, well, deep sleep, no I and mine, correct? We keep coming back to that one. It's true though, isn't it? No I and mine in deep sleep. It's so, isn't it?
But it's not an experience.
It is, Hari. You're experiencing the absence of I and mine. Okay. But you know about meditative state.
Okay, yes.
And you know that there's no I and mine there.
Yes.
Okay. And so do you, not necessarily from seated meditation, but from activity when you lose the sense of I and mine. Then if you look back at it, you look at the state of mind, you see the mind was focused. So when you're chanting the 1,000 names, there are times when you lose the sense of I and mine, correct? Yes? So he's making the point again that this sense of I and mine is arising, it's only in the mind. And you are not to identify in that way. You are not to identify in that way. You are not to identify as the body. That identification as the body is only existent in the mind. The mental covering may be compared to the sacrificial fire. It's fed by the fuel of many desires. The 5 organs of perception serve as priests. So the sense organs are serving as priests, offering this oblation to the mind. Interesting way. See if you see it. You see a homa. In a homa, the priest is offering substances into the fire. Yes? Yes. Okay. Here, the fire is the mind, and the sense organs are offering oblations into it.
Oh, I see.
So the mental covering may be compared to the sacrificial fire. And it, by the way, is ravenous. Yeah? In the state of delusion, the mind is a ravenous fire. Yeah. It will eat anything that's poured into it. It'll consume it. Yeah, you just keep pouring. So the sense organs just keep pouring in and it keeps consuming. And while the mind is consuming all of this as something separate, individual, and raga-dvesha, we look in what we see in this quote-unquote normal state, is everything seems to be about maximizing the experience of pleasure and minimizing the experience of pain. Even the yogi, the supposed yogi, is dealing with the same thing in the mind. Why did we come to yoga? Most of us because it was pleasurable and not painful. And as long as we continue to pursue that, we're feeding the same beast, the same fire. So the purification is to stop feeding the fire. Objects of desire, desirable. Why? Because they're pleasant or they seem to lead towards pleasure. Even honestly, when we enter yoga, generally speaking, we enter yoga because we think that it will give us happiness. But we're still caught up in the same old notion of pleasure equals happiness.
Yeah.
And pain equals unhappiness. Huh? And yet, we have to, that's not the case. It's not the case. There are two paths. The path of the pleasant and the path of the good. Yeah? And the path of the pleasant is defined by that which is pleasing in the beginning or sweet in the beginning, but painful like poison in the end. And the path of the good is that which is painful in the beginning, but sweet as nectar in the end. And this is the purification that's being spoken of, is we have to choose to stop living the life related to sense objects, trying to find that which is pleasant and avoid that which is painful. Sadhana turns that around, doesn't it? So he's describing sadhana for purification. Sadhana turns that around. It's hard to get up early in the morning. So it's beneficial though. So get up early in the morning. It's hard to control the mind, but it's beneficial, so control the mind. Yes? It wants to go here to the old patterns. It wants to get caught up in this fear or anxiety. But at a deeper level, you recognize that that's not beneficial. It doesn't serve anything. It wants to imbibe in old patterns of anger and judgment and all of this. Is that beneficial? No, not beneficial. It covers the real I. I lose myself. So, he continues. He says, ignorance is nowhere except in the mind. Ignorance only exists in the mind. The mind is filled with ignorance, and this causes the bondage of birth and death. The mind is permeated with this ego sense. And so we have to stop listening to the mind. We have to unmind the mind. Intellect. And this is the way out. The discriminating faculty, with its powers of intelligence, together with the organs of perception, is known as the covering of intellect. To be the doer is its distinguishing characteristic. It is the cause of man's birth, death, and rebirth. The power of intelligence that is in the covering of intellect is a reflection of the Atman, the pure consciousness. So the intelligence that is in the intellect is a reflection of the pure light of the I itself. Here's the situation that we find ourselves in. This I-ness and mindness, where does it seem to be located? It's said to be ego, but where does it actually seem to be located? It seems to be located in the conscious mind. It doesn't seem to go away except when we transcend the mind. Is it so? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's in every activity of mind, except when the mind is one-pointed or asleep. Yeah?
Yeah.
I-ness and mindness is there.
Even when you transcend the mind, it feels like you can see it wants to come back.
Yeah. Even there, it seems, and there you can see it kind of as a shadow over here. Wanting to reassert, wanting to get back in the game again. Oh, which is why the watchword vigilance. What are we watching for? We're watching for the invasion of the I-ness and mindness once again. So, and whether we know it or not, the intellect is involved. Nothing happens without making a choice. You choose to act or you choose not to act. There are multiple assertions within the human experience. Multiple voices, as it were. It's not just one. It's not just an assertion that says, I need to go to the head of the line and get my food. It's not just that. There's also something deeper that says I should stand back and not put myself first. Isn't there? And so we have to choose every time. And in order for the organs of action, there's this beautiful dissertation in Holy Gita from Swami Chinmayananda. And I'll mention that for those joining us online. I'll actually add a link. We have a PDF copy of Holy Gita. And in the introduction, he gives a beautiful dissertation on what we're dealing with. He dives into the mind itself and explores the mind. And he speaks of there being two primary aspects of mind. There is we can call it subconscious mind here, which is connected to the sense organs. So it is perceiving what is out there, both in the waking state and the dream state. It perceives. So when a smell comes to the nose, there's something here that's identifying that smell. Is it so? It puts a name on it. It goes through all of the field of experience. I use pizza a lot. And it says pizza. But it's not just that it says pizza. If whatever that reactive aspect identifies is perceived as being pleasant, then it will start a process in the body even, and salivation may begin, etc. But if I'm to eat, that requires the organs of action. And the organs of action are connected to the conscious mind or the intellect. Right. And so in one way we can call the subconscious or manas as the perceiving aspect of mind. And we can call the conscious mind the acting aspect of mind. Because for any action to happen, it has to assent or choose. Yeah. Right? Anything. So either to assert the organs of action, to move the hand, to start the process that causes the movement of the hand, or to assert, I will not move it. It has to do one or the other. Right. In order for anything. So intellect is actually always involved, Nika, if this makes sense. Intellect is always involved. We can say, well, I didn't have a choice, but it's not true. We always have a choice. And it may be very hard. It may be that the patterns are so strong, like the addict, the one who's addicted to heroin, that urge towards it, it's in the reactive, which has identified this as most pleasant and has asserted, as it were, I will have this now. Yeah. But in order to actually lift the spoon and put it over the fire, there has to be a choice made to do it. And there's something else asserting quietly, you should not do that because you lose yourself or whatever. You should not do that. And then the choice is made, and it's very difficult. And for a long time, we may be so caught up in that other choice because the habit is so strong. And the intellect hasn't really begun to see the ramifications of the choice that's being made. It's the one that's choosing otherness. It's what's choosing to go after those sense objects. It's what's choosing to get that new boyfriend or girlfriend or new husband or wife or new car or new job or more money to go after it or to move across the country. Or that's all. You can't say, I was made to do it. That's false.
But even after we see all this, it seems there's like a force that can come and corrupt the intellect. And try to find small.
No, it cannot do it. It cannot do it on its own. It cannot do it on its own. Cannot do it on its own. The intellect can become impure, of course, and it already is impure. But that's as a result of choices that have been made by the intellect. It's not a result of what happens to it. And so choice is there. Choice is there. Now, we've made choices to honor the ignorance, the not I, for how long, for how many births. And so the awakening, though, that's spoken of is the intellect. And the other aspect of the situation which wants to be known is that this I, the real I, what is the delusion? What is the bondage? What is the... If I'm not identifying with the light, what am I identified with? Where do I seem to be? And I seem to be that intellect. I seem to be that power of choice. Because I find myself in the situation, in this human experience, I find myself in the situation where it seems like I'm choosing between this and that, or I could say, I didn't have a choice, but I did. I forgot. Okay, that's fine. Yeah? But now I remember that I forgot. And now I have another choice. So I have a choice every moment. This is a conversation of what the life seems to be. And in spiritual path, we work with it. But the point that's being made is the I is identified improperly with the intellect. Now, what needs to happen in order to get out of the bondage? The intellect, as it were, needs to recognize that I am not what I took myself to be. I am not this person. I am not even this rationating faculty. I am not even that which is choosing between the shadow or the light. I am the light. And I choose to honor the light. I choose not to honor the ego sense any longer. I choose not to listen to the reactive tendencies any longer. I choose not to act on them. Intellect has to do this. This is why awakening, the buddhi, the intellect, or the vinya, the awakened intellect, the intellect, as it were, that leads the integration, that says, I am not listening to you any longer. I am not going to act because I control the action within this human experience. This is the intellect saying this, which is powered by the light, which has access to the light, which is right next to the light. I am now surrendered to thee. I am thine, all is thine. And this is where the Buddha is born. What does the Buddha mean? Buddhi, intellect. Buddha, subject to the light. So the Buddha is the intellect, as it were, the person who has recognized its own non-being, its own identification that was improper, that was incorrect, that was wrong. It has determined that I am not what I took myself to be. It has made a choice. And I choose to serve the Atman, to serve the light, to serve God, instead of serving the shadow, instead of serving the false self. So the awakening is the intellect, as it were, and that allows for the freedom of the Atman in the human experience. So in waking state, what do you get? You finally have an intellect, an intelligence that is no longer subject to delusion. Why? Because it's refused. It's renounced it. It's renounced the delusion. It's renounced the voice in the head that says, I need this. It's renounced it. It says, I don't listen to you anymore. I only listen to Amma. I only listen to the light. Yeah? I take my guidance from the light, from the inner guru. I don't take it from this shadow any longer. Yeah? And this is it. And so, Viveka Chudamani, Crest Jewel of Discernment, what's the instrument? What is this Viveka? The Viveka is the instrument of intelligence. It's the instrument of intelligence. It's not the light itself. It's the instrument of intelligence. And what is the reality of the instrument of intelligence? Well, the reality is that the light alone is, that Atman alone is. That's the reality of it. And the instrument itself recognizes, I am not what I took myself to be. I am really the Atman. And therefore I serve the Atman. I don't try to live on my own any longer. I don't try to set my own rules anymore. I don't even try to choose between the shadow, the ego center, and the light. I've made my choice. I'm done. Yeah? I made my choice. I'm done. I serve the light alone. And the intellect has, as it were, learned how to listen to the light, how to take guidance from the light. And this is a process to do. But when you know, and the you I'm speaking of here is the intellect, when you know that all of the impulses that you deal with are false, and that every time you listen to them, they only result in pain, pain for yourself and pain for others. And when you know what that intuitive voice is, and you know that it will never lead you astray. Yes? And you surrender to it. What does that mean? You give what you thought was your life to it. Then you find through grace this integration really happens. It really begins in earnest. This is the Peace Pilgrim. When Peace Pilgrim speaks of that night, 15 years before she started walking pilgrimage. And she walked up on that hill and she said to God, to the light, I give you all of me. I withhold nothing. Use me as you will. This is exactly what this is. So she was speaking as that intellect the chooser. And the choice was made. Yeah? Whatever happens, I give you all of me. What does that mean? All of the faculties which the conscious mind is the supervisor of, as it were. I give you all of this. I give you all of my breath. I get what I take to be mine, what I take to be mine, what I've taken to be mine. I give you all of my breath. I give you all of this flow of breath. Whatever life force comes through here, I give you all of it. I give you all of my mind, all of my thought. I give you all of my, right? Because I have the capacity as intellect to control the mind. I have the capacity to choose what I'm going to put my attention and focus on. Yes? Yeah. So I give you all of it. Do with it as you will. I withhold nothing. Which means whatever happens, whatever assertion is coming from inside, no. Yeah? And then if you study their life, you see it. Any of the saints, if you look at it, there you see it. There was that point at which I've heard enough, I know enough, I have enough information. Yes? I've lived the sense-driven life enough. I've lived the life of otherness enough. Yeah? I've had enough of it. I've seen through it. I've seen that it's empty. I've seen that it doesn't provide what I thought it did. And I've seen you, my Lord, however we relate, Amma, however we relate, and I've seen you to be the real. I've seen you to be the light. I've seen you to be the healer. I've seen you to be the reality. I've seen you and alliance with you to be freedom. I've seen enough. All I want is you. This is intellect speaking. All I want is you. You only you. I am thine. All is thine. I'm done trying to live independently. Please take me and do with me as you will. I am yours. And there is where the next part of the spiritual journey begins. She said 15 years. Yeah. And the shadow doesn't go away overnight.
Right.
It doesn't. Tests continue. And now they're really tests. Huh?
Right.
Yeah. But at some point you come out of it and you realize and you say, I am not this body. And there's no question about it any longer. There's no question about it any longer. She had no question about it when she said it. Right. I can sit here and say, I know for certain I am not this body. There's no doubt. There's no question of it whatsoever. There are no voices within me that assert that anymore.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing.
It's done. It's over. That part of life is over.
But if I say all this that she said, and then I feel like there is some resistance in some parts, then it means I haven't reached that point.
And what's key is this point of surrender. And we come back to how to be free. You have to give your life to receive life. Mm-hmm. You have to give this individual life. Finally, you have to give it. We can close with this. This was from, it's the part I didn't read from satsang last night. From the daily, it was October 21 yesterday. Swami Chidananda and his, not his wisdom, he had surrendered to the wisdom. Had this to say. Pay the highest price. If you want to attain immortality, you will have to pay the highest price. That highest price is destruction of your egoism. You will have to annihilate the self-arrogating little I. You will have to crush your individuality and melt into the Supreme Being. You will have to powder your mind. Vasanas, cravings, and will to live. You must give up all possessions, including body, mind, and senses. This is the performance of Jnana Yoga in the fire of supreme renunciation. So this is what Shankara is sharing here. After having stepped us through what is the not I, What is the I? What is the bondage? When did it begin? What is its nature? And how to be free of it. This is where he's led us. And now it's up to us. And now it's up to us.
Something interesting that I read from Swami Shivananda, he was saying, don't aim to complete annihilation, merging into the nothingness or the Brahman. Just aim to purify and then
Yes.
keep a little bit of the personality so you can still be of service.
Well, the path requires of us to continue in service. Even Jnana Yoga still requires action in the world to be free of action. Being free of action, we keep coming back to that, does not mean stopping the action. It means being free of doership, being free of I-ness and mindness, being free of the delusion. That's all. So, yeah. Oh, beautiful. And so this is really what we're wanting to be able to do. Not to live a spiritual life, but to be free. To be free of what? To be free of what we took ourselves to be. So to be free of ourselves in that sense. We ourselves have been the only cause of suffering, meaning the mind. And we ourselves, again, meaning the mind, are the only way to be free, not by following the false notions, but by choosing the real and to surrender ourselves to it. Okay, so we'll close with final prayers in RT. Short. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshiyamamritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshiyamamritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshiyamamritat Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Adorable Lord of mercy and love, let us abide in thee forever and ever. Below Sakur Shivananda Maharaja Ki Jai, for all the saints and sages of all the traditions. Jai. Okay, that's right. For RT, short RT's page 160. Yobati Natandra Tarakam Nemali Yobanti Kutyo Yamane Twameva Vantam Vanavati Sarvam Tasya Vasa Sarvivam Vivati Om Gange Yamane Saiva Godavari Saraswati Narmade Sindhu Kaveri Namastudyo Namo Namaha Twameva Mata Shapita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhushkasaka Tvameva Vidyam Javinam Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Kayena Vacha Manasandriyava Buddhatmanava Prakrita Svabhavat Karomi Adyat Sakalam Parismai Narayanaye Tisarvar Prayami sarvam dharmam prechcha mamekam sharanam vraja aham tva sarvapapavyo moksha ishami ma sutra.